Good morning, friends. It's that time of day when I hang my feet off my bed and stretch and warm them up with a little bit more vigor than just under the covers first. Very, very, very first thing. This is post coffee. This is me getting back in bed or on bed because it happens to be the best height furniture in my house. This is actually a great activity to do first thing in the morning with some natural light in your eyes, by the way, if you have such access. But let's talk a little bit about this movement I'm doing and what I'm seeing in my feet. They're making progress, and with progress, sometimes it's frustrating. As soon as you start getting a little headway, you immediately start being like, why can't I do it perfectly yet? Which is, we're so spoiled sometimes, and we really can't have that attitude with the body. It's a recipe for frustration. So on my right foot, I'm able to lengthen my toes in extension without a lot of interference, right? Measurable or symptomatic interference of my flexors. And then I can press them straight down. And I'm feeling that activation nice and high at the ball of the foot, like I'm pressing the back of the toes into the ground. Boom. And that tensioning is facilitating tensioning of my forefoot. So if here's my arch, the forefoot, these muscles, not just back here. We need all segments of the foot and, of course, interacting with the calf. But we're just really lasered in on the foot because it's easy to look for videos about like calf raises and whatnot, which are great, which I highly recommend. But we need to strengthen the foot directly. And this forefoot can be some of the hardest muscles to wake up, especially if you have toes, like many of us do, that aren't very active because we don't walk with and use our toes well in shoes, and they start to like hammer and get all jacked up, right? And that's why splay is such a big deal, because you got to access and wake up and just honestly acknowledge your toes a little, get them to be not so crammed up into a little tight, frail frame, and get them moving. Okay, so then you need to get them to push down into the ground. Now I'm emphasizing that with my digits, right? The toes, not the big toe, because that's the hardest part for me, and that's where I've gotten the most headway lately. What I want you to see, and I have another video about this, and what I'm doing is you're watching this row of knuckles become higher, right? That's me bending with some degree of, it's getting stronger and stronger. It's not just how much can you move it, it's how much muscle can you radiate there, okay? That has to be strong enough for your body weight, basically, right? It's not doing it on its own, but that has to be really strong. Because I know a lot of people with really mobile toes can move them, but then they can't hold them there. They can't create any power there. So you got to be able to get your toes there and push down. I'm pushing down, and I'm feeling a massive activation of what would be the equivalent of the muscles of the side of my palm, the palm that is associated with like the fingers, right? Not the thumb. So it doesn't look it because I can't squeeze my foot in as round and demonstrative a shape, but I'm feeling like I'm really lifting that lateral arch of my foot. Lifting it how? Lifting it by pushing down into the toes and holding the heel fixed. So it's like a tent, and I'm bending the tent pole up and over its dome because we have arches on both sides of the feet and a transverse arch. And the two lateral arches, the integrity of those lateral arches is what's going to support the very critical transverse arch as well. Medial, lateral, transverse. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the medial arch, and it's critical. And pushing straight down into the big toe, and other videos, please see my short foot videos. Those are still really worth watching, and they are a great starting point. And I say starting point because you don't want to end there. It would just honestly, for lots of reasons. So now I'm actually trying to get that same straight down activation into my big toe. You can see it's starting to cross slightly under the second toe. And that is because at a certain point, I'm running out of straight downward pressure and I'm starting to get adduction. Straight down, adduction. Straight flexion, adduction. And that's not terrible. Okay, it's not good if I can't get any straight down and my toe, it's hard for me to demonstrate these things with my toes like on command, but the idea would be if I can't get any straight down pressure into the toe and I just get squeeze, or it's very, very faint down, and I don't feel it in those muscles, like mildly cramping, like really go for intensity. You have to put resistance into that action. You cannot see, but I'm fighting my own muscles. Okay? We're going to do it against the floor in a second, but that's really key. Now, ultimately, those toes are going to squeeze together. If I combine these actions, big toe down and digits down, they're also going to converge. And that's not bad. It's anti-splay. And the muscles in the foot, you'll see the pulling arms of muscles in the foot. Like the big toe flexor is on the bottom of the foot, right? But it goes to the cuboid. Not quite that path. It goes to the cuboid, right? So there's muscles that pull straight back and under the ankle. There's muscles that pull towards the cuboid. And the digit flexors pull down to the base of the foot. The short ones pull down to the base of the foot, and the long ones pull diagonally across the bottom of the foot, loop around here, and also pull up into the calf. So I say that to say they will have a convergent action. Okay, imagine those strings, and they pull, and that's because your foot is strongest when it's making a fist, and this is the equivalent of a fist for your foot. Okay. Now, once my hand is in a fist, or once your foot is in a fist, you can punch something with it, but you can't really use it. So what you need is strength between the range of motion of maximally extended, which I'm not going to do on my foot right away because it was just really crunching, and I don't want to surprise those tissues. Don't be violent with it. But if I'm going to really, that's not a bad thing to do for your foot. It's what it has to do every time you run. But my foot is cold, okay? So I'm just showing you with my hand. I'm going from maximum splay, strength in maximum splay, and strength in maximum crunch. Okay? You want to be able to have that full range and be strong at all the different increments of max splay to max anti-splay and crunch, which is fist, which is protective. So when you're on the ground is in the way of you making this full fist. Let me make a caveat. So what I mean by that, boom, down, drive the toes down, arches are lifted, they stay in effect. I take my step, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to try to imitate a good looking step from overhead with this camera. It's super awkward, and I don't want to give you the wrong idea of how that should look, so save that for another day. But the point is, the ground is in the way of you closing your hand, or the ground is in the way of you closing the foot around. But the muscles to close it in a particular order need to activate for your foot to not just bottom out. What happens is we sometimes have a foot that's not that strong in the range of motion that it needs to be to preserve the arch against the impact of the floor. What do I mean? It's like you have a hand that you can't, like say you grab a jar that's too wide for your hand, right? The lid of the jar is really wide for your hand, and you can't get strength and traction there. It's the muscles and the tendons are too long for you to get the torque and leverage that you need. So your hand is not that useful to you. If the jar were smaller, you would be able to get more torque. Okay? Why? All right, why? Because at that length, right, at the length of the muscles in that degree of contraction, you were able to fire them up and give them like muscular juice, right? You were strong at that range of motion. You weren't strong here. You were strong roughly here. Okay. Same idea. Like okay. Your foot, when it reaches the floor with maximum splay, ideally, you have all the splay you want for all the leverage pushing power, because you need to turn that foot into a little catapult. So the bigger a lever, the bigger catapult it can be. It's not very big. It's actually very small compared to the whole body. So keeping that in perspective, you want it to be as big as it can be for how small it is. So you want it to be able to splay, to be able to create rigidity and isometric tension there so it is not deformed by the ground. But we, in developing our foot strength, our foot is pretty feeble. It's in a hole, right? It's in a strength hole and deficit compared to what is demanded from ground impact forces. So every time you go to step on the ground, especially if you're splaying your foot like you're told to do, you could just be bottoming out your foot unless you're doing a lot of physical therapy. Right? Physical therapy meaning strengthening exercises, specific exercises to bring these muscles up to the level of strength they need for you to grab the ground or the jar at a big, wide stretch of your hand, okay? At a maximally splayed foot. All right, looking for the ground. With training, that's what the foot's supposed to be able to do. It's supposed to be able to do this. It's just that, is it realistic for some of us developing this later in life? And, and how many hours are you going to commit to it, right? If you commit enough hours, you can make a lot of headway. So I'm not trying to discourage you. It should be realistic. And it's a big task. But here's one of the things that happens to a foot that's not strong enough, that is repeatedly presented with the ground and, through walking and running and everything else. Every time we reach for the ground, if that foot is not strong enough out here in splay or in just a natural relaxed foot, step, relaxed foot. I'm just showing on the right foot, relaxed foot, step. Now I'm not taking a majorly demanding step here. I'm not even changing my weight really strongly, but you see the idea. When you overwhelm that foot, which, and by the way, reminding us that the foot is talking to your whole leg and your hip and your booty muscles and your core. So it's like, I'm good. I've got a good grip on the jar. Go ahead, push. It's telling its friends. It's, catapult me, send force, because we're going to take a nice long leap with this stride or whatever. We're going to be nice and stable and balanced. We're not going to collapse. We're good. Create power upstream. If the toes and if the foot does not, it's overtaxed, it's like it's spread too far, or even, sadly, a foot that is not splayed at all, but is just that weak, okay? And I'm talking about my own feet. No judgment. I'm talking about my own feet. If it's too weak, it's going to say hips, glutes, we're just really rasping on the floor. We're not steady. We're not balanced. Don't send any power. Sorry, can't help you. Can't really take a powerful stride, can't take a powerful step, leads to instability all up the body as all the muscles try to not do their job of pushing you. They are all avoiding doing their job. You have a whole bunch of muscles in fear that you are not stable and they're not going to generate any power for you if instead they go into sort of panic emergency mode of gripping. Now here's what that looks like. I can show you better on my left foot because it has some of the remnants of that tendency, which is more of a grasping. Now see, also I see this this little fledgling split in those toes when I do that. That is caused by a specific muscle firing pattern in this foot. See how those toes are kissing like really quickly? I'm getting not a lot of power pushing down into that toe. Now I can actually do it better. I can. I've come a long way with this foot. Now check her out. Check her out. I can push down much more powerfully. Quite similar. It's getting there. It's really getting there compared to the other foot. But there was a lot of things, and there still are a lot of symptoms in that foot, especially when I'm showing you and I'm not really focusing and I'm not letting, see how when I put weight on the foot, much better performance from that foot. When I just kind of try to demonstrate it, I cannot demonstrate it very well because I immediately go into some of the other muscle pathway patterns. We are retraining neuromuscular patterns in our movement on a step-by-step basis. It's highly frustrating. It's worth the work. And I'm just showing you, making a lot of progress, but it is slow. So let me just, with a little bit better light and without my shadow over myself, show you some of the ways you can see what's going on. Now, this foot, when I go to point it sorry, it's all cold now. It's stiff and cold. Please know, when I actually do my exercises, I think I mentioned this every video, I don't have the camera on. I actually put a lot of energy into it. I put a lot of focus. I put a lot of muscularity and attention. My feet have my undivided attention when I'm doing my exercises for real. Otherwise, the set does not count. Doesn't count just like if you're just wiggling your feet while you're on the phone or on a conference call or whatever. It is not the same. Put on a song to help you get in a rhythm and to help keep time for you, okay? I just had a song on and I was doing this. And really flare and really point. Just rep it out because you need volume. Volume in the exercise sense. Like you need a lot of reps. Eventually you can add more resistance, but you might just need to start with fatiguing the crap out of your feet with reps because think about how many thousands of times we're stepping on our toes or on our feet, right? They are made for high volume. So you can't just do, I did 12 toe points or toe crunches. No, God, that's not how we're going to get any headway. Okay, so have a look here. I just snuck up on my feet. I snuck up on them and I pulled them into some extension. This might not be terribly obvious visually. I can see it because I know what I'm looking for. But if you look at the right foot, the toes are straighter. They are straighter starting at the base. They're not totally straight. I'm sure some people can really push into their toes, but they're straight, okay? And I'm feeling tension on the skin on the other side, not just on the ball of the foot. I'm not driving down into the ball of the foot. I'm lifting the toes. The arch is intact, so I'm lifting the toes with the arch intact, okay? On the other foot, I'm getting there. I used to not be able to do this at all, friends. I have to acknowledge that because I want you to know it's come a long way. And if you're like, my toes are super hammered and jacked up, there's hope. So when I pull up here, number one, I'm not getting the same nice, tight sensation. It's the equivalent of, see where my hand is like squeezing the blood out of the base of the finger, right? At the deepest knuckle. That tensioning right there is what I'm looking for. That's telling me I am driving, and that's going to be the fulcrum where I then contract. I'm going to extend hard here and then push hard there. One of the things that's interfering with that is that I cannot straighten these toes as well. And that has to do with some tightness in both extenders and flexors, muscles on the bottom and the top of the foot that are tight from this foot being weak and trapped in shoes, and also from an ankle injury and an Achilles injury at very different times in my life. But that, this foot has been through it. Just saying. And it's my non-dominant side and blah, blah, blah. And, you know my history, or what, maybe you do, orthotics for 30 years. So my feet were just in a massive deficit. And then this one was some extra fun, curious things. The other one also had surgery when I was an infant, and, just they each have their own history. And what's cool is that they're so different. I learn from each of them, and then I can share different things with you. So, and then my feet teach each other, which is kind of neat. All right, so cannot straighten those toes as well. Number one, which means when I go to grab the ground, first of all, that's telling me that I can only get strong in a small range. It's the jars that I can open with this hand, right? The floor that I can push against with this hand is a much smaller footprint, much smaller. I'm not strong enough to splay and create power. I'm just not there yet. I'm getting there. It's looking a lot better. You see when I think I'm starting to see some of that articulation of these knuckles. It's not as good. It's not as clean, but it's coming. And I'm starting to be able to push straighter down into the toe before it kisses its neighbor. Again, what is that a sign of? It's a sign that the foot wants to converge before it has pushed down. And all of the things I'm describing to you, the clawing, the hammering, anything tensioning away from the floor or squeezing the foot into a smaller position, right? Like that, which is how my foot used to look, more or less, okay? But with toenail polish and less calluses. So, ridiculous. So, anything that is an avoidant clawing or something, right? Everyone's foot is going to have a different reaction, or there's going to be patterns, but different reactions. If you go to push down and your foot does that, or you can't lengthen and give me that like tongue depressor feeling of the back of the toe against the ground, and instead you push down and it very quickly curls. Okay, see how it's lifting away from the floor? I'm exaggerating, but what that's telling you is your foot is like, I'm not ready. Too much weight. I'm going to get scared. It gets scared because it's not strong enough. I'm using emotional terms about the foot, which is, I know, odd. And I just read, I'm not wearing pants. Sorry. I don't think it matters to you. But I just realized I filmed a little higher than I was planning. Okay. So, and some of you are probably wondering. Okay. So pushing straight down, loading the foot, giving it confidence, teaching it to get stronger in those toes so that they can tension at the appropriate length of splay and spread, which is giving you access to the muscles you need. When they claw too quickly, a lot of muscles in the foot, this is actually a big part of the cause. Okay, so the cause, like why? Why does this happen? It's because many muscles, like, I don't know. I can't even remember. It's like 18 muscles of the 20-something in your foot attached to your toes, directly or indirectly. Okay? So if the toes cannot lengthen in tension, that means 18 of the 20 muscles in your foot that are required to help you with all the mechanics of the foot, stiffening of the arch, the heel rocker mechanism, the heel to midfoot to forefoot, like all the rockers that your feet have to go through, like checkout gait guys. We can talk about that. But all the different functions of the foot cannot be supported because it's like if you use the tent analogy that I did earlier with my right foot. Imagine you're trying to post a tent and you keep driving it into the ground on one side, like the heel. And now you've got this arch you want to create with the foot. But every time you put the other side of the tent pole in the ground, it slips and everything just collapses. That means there's no tension, there's no productive tension. And all those muscles are looking for your toes to be strong enough to lengthen and push straight down. And then it starts the chain of events of pulling. They're all playing tug of war with the fascia that attaches into the tug of war in the sense that you got lots of muscles attaching to this plantar fascia, attaching to those tendons into the foot to create productive, constructive tension for that foot to be a stable lever. They're all pulling, and oops, the toes slip, and everybody falls. Okay? And your hip is like, this is useless, right? That hip, just forget about it. Those glutes, forget about it. You have glute amnesia, it's probably your feet. Okay? You cannot strengthen anything upstream if this foot, like meaningfully, you can strengthen it in isolation, but in terms of functionally how it's going to translate to gait, it's going to be you got to work both ends. You really need to get the feet up to speed, and they will be a limiting factor. They will be a limiting factor in what your hips can do for you. It's just that simple. Now, the happy thing is when you start making headway like I am on this foot, you're also going to be waking up those hip muscles, and it'll lead simultaneously, if you're thinking about it and constructive about it, to breakthroughs at both ends. So you can be working both ends of that candle at the same time. Okay? Doesn't have to be sequential. So again, when those toes cannot lengthen, they cannot appropriately tension, and they can't get the splay they need to take up the footprint, literally, that they're supposed to, and all the muscles in the foot can't anchor to them to pull for the rest of the foot to function how it needs to. That includes things like keeping your arch lifted, not preventing overpronation, helping to pull you into productive dorsiflexion, right? Rotating your tibia over your foot without it collapsing, rotating down the side of the foot, which is also why the little toes are so key, because your weight is looking, meaning your body weight, is looking to travel with your tibia. Oh, let me not show you with that foot. Down the outside edge. Okay, it wants to travel down the outside edge of the foot. My knee is going straight over my big toe, more or less. Knee over the big toe. But my body weight is going down the outside edge, which is why we had to make this really strong. It's going to travel. The big toe goes down, pinky toes goes down, and then it travels across the toes. So you got like a kickstand on either side. Kickstand on either side, and it travels across the toes. Everybody joins forces. I know it looks like my toes are bent there, but they're pushing down. They're getting slightly bent back by the pressure, and then we push over in a nice, strong, healthily inverted foot. Not a mushed foot, not a bypassing foot, not over the outside. We push nice and strong because we can. All right? So left foot is working on it, and this exercise is really critical because it's not putting a lot of load on the foot. I do this, I'll show you some other variations, but just practicing, helping those muscles learn to lengthen, because I have to get out of this loop of those toes not being able to flex and extend at the metatarsal heads, right? I need to get out of this graspiness. I told you about this on the other foot, that eventually there's this action of the foot making a fist. This foot is making a fist right now. You just can't tell. That's what I was trying to say, is that the order of operations matters, because as I push straight down, eventually those muscles go from straight down to trying to squeeze to each other, but they can't because the floor is in the way. What happens on this foot is they try to squeeze together before they've loaded, before I've committed weight to activate all the muscles, to activate the cascade of tensioning, and they're squeezing prematurely because they're not strong enough to push down, and they're not facilitated to push straight down because of the way they're deformed, right? So they can't even get that action. They can't get into the position to give me the action I need because of the way they're deformed from a life in shoes and being inhibited and, all the things. This foot, it pushes straight down, and then, now I'm not making a really strong fist with it because I'm not running or doing anything crazy, but the muscles are directionally squeezing to like a fist, but from out here. So it's like what I was saying earlier. I got splay, and then I'm going to squeeze, but nobody moves because the floor is in the way. But the action is protective of the foot. It's convergent. Okay? And the order of operations matters. So this foot, although it's kind of harder to see, especially because I can't command my foot to do it very well. Shake them out. One of the things it's doing is it's squeezing together before it's pushing down. So that's what I just explained. And that's what I'm working on. So here, this little exercise, number one, it's quite fatiguing. You'll feel some burn where you need it, right? As long as it's not nerve pain and it's just muscular fatigue, etc. Work it out, right? You don't want to feel tendon pain or burn, listen to your body. But, pushing through some cramps, not push through the cramps, like let the cramp pass and then, go back to it. That means you're knocking on the door of a breakthrough that your body and your muscles need, okay? You're waking up muscles that are like, oh, shoot, I didn't know I was in this game. Yep, we need you. So let them rally. So here you're just seeing, again, if I concentrate on it, I'm getting a longer toe and better activation of the short flexors in this case, right? But I'll leave that for the jargon for another video. But it's better, and I will rep that out. Okay. Now, I said I would show you, and let's just do real fast. This exercise is great, but it's open chain. So this is great for waking up your feet before you put weight on them. Okay, among the millions of other things you can do with your feet in the air before you put weight on them to warm up the muscles, warm up the fascia, right? And just get some circulation of those feet. Super important in and of itself, whatever you want to do. But this particular exercise, which I really do like, is also fabulous. Number one, like this, which I've shown in other videos. I'm not sure if I posted them because they tend to be kind of long and crazy, but I'm doing the same thing, lifting off. The ball of my foot is not being driven into the floor. It's not punishing the ball of the foot. The arch is lifted. You can see my glasses fall off when I lean over. Such a mess, guys. The arch is lifted. Ball is on the floor, but it's not pushing down. That's important because some people can't lift their toes well without collapsing their arch. So you need that independence because the whole idea, granted, there's going to be pronation here. Right? This is right before I load the foot and I take weight onto the foot. So yes, natural amount of pronation. Okay, but I don't want to be already pronated and collapsing my arch just because my toes are clearing the ground and reaching for more territory. No. So I need that distinction. So the toes have to come up. They don't have to come up high. They just have to come up long. Arch lifted, ball of the foot meets the ground, and then push down. So a few different variations to make this exercise more functional. One, rep it out right here and just get really strong. Here's emphasizing the lift. How about I turn? Can I give you light in a different direction? No, because I'm straight over my feet either way. Sorry, guys. Now there's shadows. Good stuff. Little sliver of light on the feet. Okay. So lift and push, lift and push. You can emphasize the lift to help you find the straightness in the toes, in the extensors, and to get functional stretch under the foot because you might not be able to straighten your toes because the flexors are too tight or the extensors are too tight. It's going to be a different one, okay? Like the long flexors are too tight or the short extensors are too tight. So it's different things, okay? See my other video on that. But then you very quickly also want to take it from lifted to drive down, lifted to drive down. Now, you can do this like I am here, which is just pushing from the foot, or I don't know if you can tell. You shouldn't be able to see a big difference. I'm rocking back, rocking forward, rocking my body back, rocking my body forward, and catching my body weight on my feet. Okay? Or on my toes, excuse me. I'm not lifting my heel. I'm not doing anything. I'm just stopping myself with my toes repeatedly without letting them buckle under. Just push straight down. So I might do that 1 foot at a time because my right foot can handle more load than my left, and I don't want it to, to do all the work. So then I will come over here, and I'm just bending and letting my weight shift over the foot, and I'm trying to keep the splay in the toes. What am I doing? I'm practicing squeezing a wide jar. Just practicing grabbing it. Can I get strong here? It's not just can I get around the jar, but can I actually squeeze? I'm not taking a full corkscrew. I'm not taking a full step. I'm not really grinding power into the torque, but I'm squeezing. Be like, yep, I can create enough grip on that jar to squeeze. Just rep it out. Practice. Can I commit weight onto the foot? Can I commit? I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing there on that foot. I am able to get good pressure into the toes before I see it do nonsense. Not helpful, okay? So, and then you would rep this, rocking back further, putting more weight, making it more of a calf raise. That's really the next thing I do that is fabulous, that I really enjoy this exercise of just these little baby calf raises. Now, I'm literally doubled over upside down with a camera. This is stupid. So, not how you're going to stand up straight. You're going to do it properly. Pick all different foot arrangements, turned out, turned in, more parallel, wider stance, etc. And what I want you to try to look for is lifting here. Not just the breakover, but feel you're going to lift your heel, but imagine you're lifting here. You want to think about using the toe to pry up the forefoot. So, of course, my heel is what's going to come off the ground most obviously. But send your mental energy to this part of the foot, because that is where you might really be deficient. You can do a million calf raises and not really get that long toe flexor activation, short flexor activation into the ground with the lengthened toes. That's why that's confusing, because keeping the toes long in flexion requires the short flexors. Yeah, it's super fun and confusing. All right, so you would do 1.5 million reps. I don't know if you can tell. I'm just lifting my heels and keeping my foot rigid as I can. And again, I recommend doing it standing up, not leaning forward like this, and doing it with bent knees and straight, and doing it to fatigue. Do it until your calves and feet are on fire, such that when you're done, you're like, whoa, I don't want to take a step because I'm afraid I might hurt myself, okay? Like, I'm not trying to be a glutton for punishing you, okay? But the idea is you have to stress them. So put on music you like, and just let them, it doesn't matter how many minutes it is, but put on music you like and get stuck there. Get really into it. You will really find the firepower. And the only way your feet are going to change is if you're insistent with them, okay? Anything in the body. It will adapt to enough stimulus. So what I'm showing you here is I'm starting to feel, now if I were doing this more mindfully and not like talking and half-brained, I'd begin to feel activation radiating in different places. And that'll tell you, where is this foot's weak link? Where is this foot's weak link? What fails first in the stress test? Is it the lateral side of the foot? Is it that the toes start to deform? Do you start to feel pinching behind your heel or calf? That's a major symptom that you're not able to use the appropriate flexors and that you're starting to rely for this action. There's nothing wrong with using those flexors. They're important. All the muscles are important. They all have a role. But it's this order of operations. For this particular action, I want long, relaxed toes, relaxed in the sense that they are not relaxed toes that can functionally push straight down. And I shouldn't need a lot of the flexor muscles that are pulling under the foot for this tiny heel raise, right? For this little rock forward. I'm just committing weight to my forefoot. Commit weight to the forefoot and see what starts to happen. All right, I'm going to cut this video off before it's 40 freaking minutes practically. Here, and this is feeling so good. I don't want to stop the set. I might just start the camera, and I'm just going to keep going. But I want you to see. So I slightly turned my feet out a little bit. I'm lifting the toes, reaching and pushing, and I'm feeling very satisfying activation on this side of this foot, which is where I need it most to really get access to these toes. I was telling you I'm starting to get a lot of breakthrough in the hip on this foot and in being able to use these toes comparably to how I do on the right foot. The big toe is also coming along, but right now I'm really focused on the digits. Why? Let me just finish the thought with saying the reason this is also a super important time to practice the digits and not just pushing down into the big toe. My right foot is more advanced, so I'm also getting big toe kickstand, and meaning it's splayed and it's also driving down. But I began focusing on the toes, and that is because at this phase of gait, which is very early, right? Well, not that early because I'm already on the foot, coming onto the foot. I want to make sure I can load the outside edge of the foot. See how you can see the way the pressure is rolling down the outside edge and then across the toes? Now I'm avoiding the floor with my big toe to show you that, because the big toe can totally go down with all the whole foot, and then everybody else rolls forward. It's like striking a piano with the pinky and the thumb, and then the toes, right? You anchor, boom, and you drive through the middle of the toes. Depending on the terrain, depending on your feet, blah, 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 variation, okay? Not every step is identical, but that's what I'm finding is the strongest for me. So this exercise is great because I'm just doing this. I'm repping this. I'm teaching my foot to go down the outside edge. And that's incredibly valuable because so many of us are either overly pronating or we're just not using our little toes at all, which means we're not using that entire side of our foot at all. And I like to say, and we'll end with this, it's like if you're going to make a fist, you don't make it with these fingers. You make all the fingers, the entire musculature of the palm, talking to your whole forearm and your whole shoulder, just like in the calf, thigh, and hips, right? All the way up the body is needing the entire hand. So imagine if you make a fist and you grab like that. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous, right? Your hand would be completely like compromised. You can't get any power there, and you damage your hand no matter what you're doing, punching or pulling, right? So, like, are you hanging or are you punching? Doesn't matter. This is useless, okay? So if you're only pushing through the medial arch of the foot, which is where everyone talks about, okay, is like driving here, but you're not using the outside edge of your foot, where you are losing all this strength. That's where we're supposed to step. We don't want to step on the arch. We need to maintain that arch. That's why this big ass toe with its big fat bones compared to these more delicate team of bones. Big fat bones are helping you be strong there, but not because it has to work on its own. It needs all of this to help. So this part of the exercise, the reason I got on this little detour is because you can just rep this out, practicing loading the lateral edge of your foot. And just rep that out. Practice. Lift the toes, lengthen them, drive them down. Everybody gets rolled towards the floor on the outside edge of the foot. It's very important to note I'm not putting my knee on the outside of my foot to do that. My knee is going straight. Don't borrow from one joint for the others. My knee is going straight, but it loads the outside edge of my foot because of its very cool corkscrewing pattern at the incredible engineering of the foot itself. So knee goes straight forward, toes load the lateral edge, and eventually they load, big toe goes down, and like I said, eventually this would be gait and I would come through a stride. Okay, guys, I said let's keep this under 40 minutes, but hopefully that was useful. I'm going to let the blood out of my head and get back to my feet. Hope this is useful. Have a great workout.